What we're looking at here is a brake disc caliper. Now the first thing to point out is if you have an early bay and large 5-stud wheels, you don't need to watch this because you've got drum brakes and we're looking at disc brake pad removal. So this is the caliper. We have a brand new unit here so that we can explain exactly how it all comes apart. Basically the pads are inside here, we have the retaining clips and the pins that hold the whole thing together. And the first thing to point out is that these are not all the way home as they will be on your van. You'll need your little punch here, pin punch, that goes in, and your hammer, and it's just simply a case of tapping away. There may be some road grime on there that you may need to clean off with a wire brush first, and then it's just simply a case of withdrawing it. You may need to use a pair of pliers if it's a bit stiff. Take it out. Obviously you take out the other pin, take out here, and then we can withdraw the pads, but now it is time to do it on the vehicle. Okay, so we're ready to do the job for real, and for that case we need our latex gloves and our safety glasses, because remember we're going to be hitting a pin punch with a hammer. Also, the wheel is your friend. Something to lean against. Put a piece of tissue down, you won't lose any of the bits in the drive or wherever you happen to be doing this job. And so it's just simply a case of doing what we saw a moment ago for real. Not too much banging required. And then the lower one. You may find it a little difficult just to do the start, but once those little swages have released the other end, it'll be fine. And then possibly a combination of the pin punch and a pair of pliers, whichever you find most convenient. Mind out, because the little spring here is under a bit of tension. So you pull it out, lay it down on your piece of tissue, and then the same again, just in case we need it. It's nice and loose. And just keep your fingers over the spring part itself so you don't drop it. And then you can put the pad fitting kit all down. And you can see we're left with the brake pads, easy access. So we've removed the pins and we can see the brake pads here, but we can see some brake dust in there. Now, one, it's hazardous to health, and secondly, if brake dust has built up in there, it can make it difficult to remove the pads. So if you haven't already got any, you can order some brake cleaner from Just Kampers and it'll arrive with the rest of the stuff, and we use it just to flush away that dust. Now, we do need to remove the tyre and the other bits. So a couple of quick shakes, and then we liberally apply it over the pads, and you can see the dirty fluid coming off. Now, these quite often can be a bit of a fiddle, but with a bit of judicious wiggling and maybe a screwdriver, maybe some mole grips, whatever you find, put a bit of a wiggle there and it will come out. Now, that is the brake pad itself. In this instance, we can see that they're in very good nick, to be honest. We're just showing you how to do the job. And then the anti-squeal pads. Now, you might notice that it's flat one side and a couple of lugs on the back side. Well, those lugs there just help it retain into the caliper piston itself. Okay, so we need to closely inspect the brake pad itself. Firstly, to make sure that the wear is nice and even and that there are no strange markings on there. And then, of course, for the thickness. Now, depending on the year and model and where the brake pads you came from last time, you may have a groove up the centre. Don't worry, that's just to show you how much wear is left in there. And these do look in exceptionally good condition. And the anti-squeal pads haven't been wearing away at all either, so everything's A-OK there. We can just give those a very light sand in before putting them back in. But the other thing to check, of course, is the brake disc itself. So now we need to look at the disc itself and make sure that that's in good condition too. Well, it's quite obvious from this that this is not a particularly old disc and everything's looking A-OK, but you'll be looking for the overall thickness of the disc itself and also any strange markings down there. One thing we need to particularly look out for is a lip around the outside edge of the disc, because that never wears, and if there is a lip, it would have been difficult for you to draw the pad out, and it does show that the disc itself is wearing heavily. Okay, we just need to make sure that there's no loose brake dust left on the backing plates. And as you've seen, these disc pads are virtually brand new. If yours have seen a little bit of effort, or maybe you've been down some mountains, you may need to just deglaze the surface of the disc itself, and that's quite simple to do. You get some light grade sandpaper and just go over the top and just scuff it up a little. And likewise with your brake disc if it's heavily glazed up, but these are fine. So all we need to do is put some of the Just Kampers anti-squeal compound on there. Now this product is safe to use on both sides of the backing plate. We only need a small amount on this side, just where it's in contact with the head of the piston. And then put plenty on there. Remember, it's smooth on one side, and that's the side that goes onto the backing plate itself. It is important not to get any of this product onto the surface of the brake pad itself, or else your brakes are going to be next to useless. So both backing plates have the anti-squeal compound on now, and we're ready to replace the brake pads, but the most important thing is just to clean any grease we may have on the hands. The last thing we want is anything on those brake surfaces, or else the brakes are just not going to work at all. And then it's a case of slotting everything back into place. Take your time, be patient, and it all will go in. So you may find it easier just to slide the backing plate in a little first. So in that goes. And then just remember, just that gentle wiggle, take your time. There's no point losing your rag, and everything will go in nicely. Don't worry too much about final alignment. We need to get both sets of pads in first. Okay, now we can look at fitting the retaining kit. Okay, then prior to fitting the retaining kit, you may find you have to do a final bit of light tapping just to line the pads and the backing plates up. And again, it's all a case of wiggle and gentle taps, just so those pins are going to slide through nicely. So we've got our retaining clip. Remember, these parts here are holding the pads in, and these bits here are holding the pins in. So it just literally goes in like that. And we tilt the first one. And remember, we've got this little area here that we'll be tapping home in a moment. That goes on the inboard side. And it's just a case of wiggling it through till it locates the opposite side. And then just a gentle bit of tapping just to get it started. At the moment, we're not too worried about getting it all the way home. And then we go for the top pin. Again, wiggle it through. It is quite a bit of pressure you need there, so you may need a friend or possibly get a screwdriver onto it. And we just need to pull it through. And again, do a bit of gentle tapping to get it close, but don't ram it home until you can double check that you're definitely in line with the other end of the caliper. Okay, well, I've had a look down this hole here and I can see the end of the bottom pin. I'm not worried about the top one yet, so it's a case of using a pin punch like we did at the start and then lightly tapping this back home. Until you see the tip pushing through, and then that's nicely secure. Okay, so to get the top pin in, we need to push some tension down on the spring part here, and then just wiggle the end around. You can see me moving around here until you can either feel or physically see that the end is engaged. And then again, we just use our pin punch and drift it home. And again, you're just looking so that that tip's definitely protruded through and the spreader plate is firmly locating that pin in place. And that's just about it. Job done. In summary then, we've checked and replaced the brake pads and had a look at the condition of the discs.
Now we've only looked at one side, it's exactly the same on the other side of the vehicle, but it is very important that you do both sides at the same time. The first time you take the vehicle out, a nice gentle bit of braking a couple of times, and then make sure that everything's okay with a proper emergency stop. The tools we used were very, very simple, just a hammer, a pin punch and a pair of pliers, and of course we used the JK Consumables item of the anti-squeal grease. The last thing you need to do is download the JK fact sheet, print it off and keep it handy for when you do the job yourself.